In this week's brand new episode of Hill Climb Monsters in Project Cars 2, we're basking in a 12-cylinder symphony as the McLaren F1 GTR Longtail takes on our Azure Coast Hill Climb course. But can this V12 wielding monster ascend to the top of our leaderboards? Let's go find out. What's going on, guys? My name's Batilio and welcome back to Project Cars 2 and a brand new episode of Hill Climb Monsters. And this week's challenger, as you can see on screen, is the McLaren F1 GTR Longtail. And the reason I decided to go for this car for this week is, well, why not really? It's got a glorious V12 soundtrack. It's a legendary GT racer. Not this iteration, but the original McLaren F1 GTR, which competed at Le Mans, won in '95, and then they basically adjusted it, added a bit more length to it to, I believe to make it a bit more stable at high speeds, but we'll get into that in a moment. So yeah, legendary car, and I figured why not? I was in a McLaren F1 GTR kind of mood today, so there we go. So yeah, for those of you who are new to this series, however, how it works is each week in this series I take a car, I get 2 hours of setup and practice time, and then I have an hour of time runs, and the best time is the one you see during the episode, basically, and then we'll see how it stacks up on the real time, on the game leaderboards, and on our own personal leaderboards as well. So there we go. But let's jump into it, and we'll start off by taking a look at the stats now. So produced in 1997, this has a glorious 6-litre V12. This is the S70 -2 engine, which is nearly identical to the car we had a few weeks ago. The BMW V12 LMR has the BMW S70-3. The differences, I believe, are minimal. I think the -3 is maybe a little bit lighter, a bit more fuel efficient, maybe has a slightly higher power output, so on and so forth. But they are within the same family and nearly identical. So yeah, that V12 is bolted to a 6-speed sequential gearbox. So all is that is producing 600 brake horsepower, which is good enough to push this thing from 0 to 60 in just over 2.5 seconds, and a top speed, providing you have a straight long enough, of 240 miles an hour. It does have ABS but no traction or stability control. It does weigh just over 2,000 pounds. Control difficulty is rated at 2, and cornering speed is rated at 2 as well. So yeah, and of course it is rear wheel drive. So yeah, fairly impressive all around. In terms of practice and setup, the big thing with this car was it was very, very snappy, and I think it was just wound a bit too tight, especially at the rear of the car. So I did soften up the rear, the dampers and the shocks and the springs and so on and so forth. I did soften it up, and that really helped kind of get rid of that and dial out that snappy behaviour, especially through the slower corners was where I was finding it. Fast changes of direction, like the center S's, were still a little bit difficult, so I did soften up the roll bars a little bit at the front. I did flip-flop at the front a little bit, but a little bit of the rear as well. I did also adjust the tyre pressures. The gear ratios as well had to be adjusted because I wasn't getting out of 5th gear down the happy highway. The other tricky thing was finding the right balance in terms of downforce front and rear. I did play around with the ride height at the front to maybe just go a little bit lower in terms of the downforce, but eventually I settled on 2 at the front and 5 at the rear. Yeah, I mean, it was a tricky car to set up and to try and find the sweet spot. I still think there is definitely more work if you are better at setting a car up than me, and I imagine a lot of you are, because I'm still relatively a novice at it. I reckon there is a lot more you can get out of this car, but softening up the rear of the car definitely will help, and it will just calm it down a bit through the slower corners. As you would imagine, though, with it being Hill Climb Monsters and me driving, there were a few accidents, and we start off as usual with everybody's favourite accident black spot in Project Cars 2, the magic roundabout. So coming down, took a bit too much curb, really. It was tricky in this car because it sits so low at the front end. You really can't go and attack the magic roundabout. So those sort of accidents, I had quite a few of them, let's just say that. The other one comes from sweeps, so we don't normally have accidents down here, but yeah, the rear end just got away from me a little bit, tried to gather it up after the contact, and then it just went away again. So I don't know if it was a case that maybe I overheated the rear tyres, but I was on occasion getting just just times where the downforce would just wash away. More so at the front than the rear, but occasionally it would happen at the rear, and it would you just feel the rear just go very, very light, like there's no downforce at all, like the wing's just completely broken off. So that was tricky, and like I said, trying to find the right setup suspension-wise, in terms of obviously ride heights can help with downforce, but also the right balance in terms of the front and rear wings as well. It was very, very tricky to sort of alleviate that, but I think I've got where it is now for this particular run, the best of both worlds. So yeah, there we go. In terms of the leaderboards, we'll start off with the games one, first of all. So our current best time in this particular category, the GT category, is with the Ferrari F50 GT, a 631.931, or 932 as it is on the leaderboard you're going to see in a moment. The fastest McLaren F1 GTR Longtail time is from our friend Chris Jones, someone I've raced with on numerous occasions, a very quick racing driver. He's got a 630.199. What makes that impressive though is he did it without setup. And that's tricky because this thing was a dog when I first started driving it. So yeah, hats off to Chris Jones. The top time is still a 6:13.221 set by Chris Jones with a different profile. That is true, cheeky bastard. So yeah, we're going to be going for that time at some point in this series, a little bit further down the line. But yeah, I think we should definitely be aiming for at the very least beating our current best time in the Ferrari F50 GT, and at the most maybe beating Chris Jones. How much by I'm not sure, but that's what we're going to be aiming for. In terms of our leaderboards though, I don't think this thing is going to be troubling the TS050 hybrid that sits at the top with the 541.383, but again, beating the Ferrari F50 down in 7th is a goal. A really ambitious goal would potentially be going to beat the BMW V12 LMR. They do share an engine, but I think the BMW V12 LMR is just an inherently better car. I think it was designed specifically to go racing. It wasn't a road car that was been fiddled with and fettled and adjusted to make it a racer. So I don't know, I'd say beating the Ferrari F50 GT is the main one. Anything above that I think is a bonus. Maybe beating the McLaren F1 McLaren P1 GTR would be a really big bonus for us, but we'll see what we can do. The aim is to beat the F50 and to beat Chris Jones's best time with the McLaren the Longtail McLaren F1 GTR. So yeah, so what we're going to do now though is we are going to head down to the track and we are going to see what the McLaren F1 GTR Longtail did on its best run. Okay then guys, here we go. McLaren F1 GTR Longtail on our Azure Coast Hill Climb course, and as we head down to the first corner booty curve, this one was tricky. I tried it in 5th gear. It was just very, very understeery in 5th gear, so I did have to start coming down into 4th in order to get the right amount of turn and to remain relatively quickly. But down into cruise liner corner now, get it down into 2nd gear, get that nose in. Some slow speed corners are quite tricky, but it wasn't too bad through cruise liner and trash can corners, so I must have done something right with regards to setup. But down the hill we go towards the magic roundabout, and again, even at this point I still hadn't quite figured out the best way to take it and how much curb I could take while still remaining quickly. I think that was as good as I'd ever done it, but I think there was still more to find. But into stickman squats now. Nice early turning, clip that curb on the inside, up the hill, under the bridge, and down onto the happy highway. A little bit of a twitch at the rear, clip that cone, and away we go. And like I said, in terms of setup, the original setup, you weren't getting out of 5th gear. It was just the gearing was way too long. I think it was I based it off of or used the LMR setup for it. So that'll be something that you want to adjust. But coming down into traffic cone corner, little lift, got on that curb a little bit, slightly unsettled it, but we managed to keep hold of it, and away we go again over this jump. Get it down into 4th gear and get that nose in, down into Stonewall corner. I did have a few troubles here. Occasionally, like I said, the fronts of the car would just misbehave a little bit. Sometimes it'd be ultra grippy and ultra pointy. Other times it would be very squirmy. And like you saw there, a little bit of oversteer. We managed to collect it. It's a good job we weren't going straight there, because that might have turned into an accident at the end of the run. But I think that little bit of oversteer may have helped us. Got the car lined up nicely, almost like a Scandi flick, though it was not intentional. But getting the nose in through here, again it was tricky to having to feather the throttle. As you can hear, couldn't take it fully. The turning wasn't there, and the rear was still a little bit unstable through this section. But down to 2nd gear, and down we go again towards what is the slowest corner on our course, James May Corner, named after Captain Slow of the Grand Tour. Not the best I've ever taken it, maybe a little bit wide, a little bit too deep on the brakes, but we make it through okay, and off we go down towards the back end of the first sector. That corner was also very tricky. I found it towards the back end, the rear would just start to bleed off downforce, and it did result in a few accidents. However, I didn't get any of them on footage, on tape, sadly, so you'll have to take my word for it. Who would lie about accidents though? But through danger curve and down the hill onto outrun, and we're going to get it up into 6th gear. Again, it was through here, it was pretty good. Not the best car we've ever had through here, but not the worst by any stretch of the imagination as well. I still think there's quite a lot of time to find in terms of setup with this car. Maybe a good 2, possibly 3 seconds. Of course, driving ability does come into it. There are going to be guys out there who are just inherently faster than I am. I accept that. But I do think there's still some time to find with setup. So if you haven't driven this car on this course and you want to, you can definitely find the time. It will definitely go quicker than this time, I believe. At least in my hands. Maybe your hands are a bit better. It'll go a lot faster, but who knows. But here we go on to the Monga-McRae Hill Complex now. One of the more tricky sections of our course. And this thing wasn't bad in the air. It was okay through some of these corners. The real Achilles heel of this car, I think, is the slow corners. I don't know if that was alleviated. I mean, there's that great video of a battle at Le Mans with between the McLaren F1, the short version, and the Porsche 911 GT1. And through the corners, the Porsche just had the McLaren licked, but as soon as the McLaren got on a straight, it would just power past it. So, and again, through the videos I saw, there was quite a few slow speed corners, so that seems to be the Achilles heel, especially the exit, the corners, and maybe just coming towards the mid corner is where this thing struggles a little bit. You see, I'm just having to really tippy toe through that section, especially corners that are not flat as well. You know, a little bit of undulation, a little bit of uneven camber, be it negative or positive, as we hit the wall there. That is not going to help our time. First time in a while we've done that, actually, but we're didn't really lose much time from that, and it's only our second mistake. But down through here, have to be careful. You can easily get dragged out into that wall, and that could put an end to your run very, very quickly. And again, just being gentle over these bumps as we head now onto the Great Ocean Highway through the tunnel. You've got to be brave through here. Then we take a little bit of curve on the inside, a little bit of a square, but we hold it nicely and down towards the end of sector number 2. And I can tell you, through sectors 1 and 2, we are up on our best time. What that best time is, you don't know, but you'll find out in about a minute and a half's time. But as we move down towards the back end of the Great Ocean Highway, this corner here, very tricky. You've got to turn in quite early, as you can see, quite early there, just to maybe clip a little bit of that grass on the inside as well, just to get the right line. It does bog down a little bit, as you saw there. Coming down again, it seems a little bit unnecessary, but staying in it, it's one or the other. I think you could find arguments for both, but I decided to stick in 6th gear as we now come down towards one of our favourite corners, Deception. This corner can catch you out, and it did almost a little bit there. See how it just started to drag you out and just suck you into oblivion. It's a tricky corner, but we make it through and onto sweeps now. This is where we had an accident in the build-up. So again, you can just hear me tippy-toeing, just feathering the throttle, being very, very gentle with it. This thing, it is a little bit point and squirt, I will admit, like some of the older turbocharged, you know, cars like the Lotus 98T. That was very much a point and squirt car, but down into here, it sort of came into its own a little bit more. Not the best car I've had through here, but at the moment it's not doing too badly. A little bit understeery and a little bit unstable at the front of the car, but up through here, again, this car tends to catch cars out with understeer, but this thing did very, very well. And the other big thing about this is the brakes. The brakes are superb in this car. The ABS obviously helps, but this is very much a very good car under braking. But we come across the line now, and it's going to be a time of 6 minutes 29.310. So we have beaten the Ferrari F50 GT from I think it was week 4 or 5, I think it was. So it's been a long time coming, but we've got a new leader in our GT, you know, our new leading GT1 car, I suppose you could say. And in addition to that, we've also just put up the fastest McLaren GTR Longtail time on PS4 in the world as well. So I'm relatively happy with that. I can't really say fairer than that when you think about it. But yeah, so there's the leaderboard, 629.309, about 9/10 of a second up on Chris Jones's time, but he did it without setup, so there we go. But the fastest non-Mercedes CLK LM time on PS4 in the world is, I think, pretty impressive. I'll settle for that. I do think there's more time to find, though. I definitely think there's more time to find. I think we maybe lost a smidgen of time hitting that wall, but the oversteering moment just before we went in Ice Cream Cove, I think that probably did help us a little bit, actually, rather than hinder us. And if nothing else, it was very much a neutral in terms of how we would have taken it. But yeah, overall, quite impressed. Like I said, there's a bit more time to find. I think if I had more time to work on setup, I could go a bit faster. I still think there's maybe another second and a half in this, but tracking down the 7th place will be difficult, and it definitely looks like the CLK LM is the car to have for this particular course. But yeah, so there we go. And in addition to this thing goes 6th on our full-time time trial leaderboards. So like I said, it beat the Ferrari F50 GT. Unfortunately, it couldn't beat the McLaren P1 GTR, quite a way off of that, and still quite a way off the Jaguar XJR 9 LM from week 10, I think it was, or episode 10. So yeah, I mean, we've done what we set out to do, I think. Like I said, I still think there's a bit more time. I don't know whether we could find time to beat the XJR. I don't think we could beat that the CLK LM in 7th place on the game leaderboards. But overall, I'm relatively pleased with it. But there we go. So yeah, guys, that's the end of today's episode, I guess. So thank you everybody so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, would like to see more Project Cars 2 or general racing content from myself, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And when you do subscribe, be sure to ring that bell notification so you get nice little emails and nice messages when all my new videos go live. Also, let me know in the comments, guys, if there are any cars you would like to see me drive in this series. Always open to your suggestions. I've got a long list and I am working through them. So if you have a suggestion, a car you'd like to see me drive in this series, leave a comment down below. But again, guys, thank you everybody so much for watching. Stay cool, and as always, I will catch you in the next video. Peace!